Oh, baby. You are a whole lot of woman.
I don't want to be associated with just the martial arts, action, personality. That's not, I found myself in it, but I don't even think that's my strong point.
Tommy, when you encounter such gorgeous ladies, the correct way to greet them is to say, "Good afternoon, ladies."
In 1998, a black man in leather and silver strapped a sword to his back and became Marvel's first superhero to actually make the studio money, $131 million worth of it. Wesley Snipes wasn't just Blade, he was the blueprint, the one who proved a brother could anchor a franchise before Hollywood even pretended to care. But 10 years later, that same man stood in an Ocala courtroom, hands folded, listening to a judge sentence him to 3 years in federal prison for something most folks didn't even understand: failing to file tax returns. Not fraud, not stealing, just refusing to play a game he said was rigged from the jump.
Man, is I got this video with Prince. He is talking about Wesley Snipes, and look at what he say, and think about Typhon Fu or that whatever Fu.
The cameras loved him on red carpets, but when the IRS came knocking in 2006, those same lights turned into flashbulbs outside a Florida estate as agents hauled away boxes of his life. Snipes lost nearly 3 years behind bars, watched his career shrink to straight-to-DVD purgatory, and became a cautionary tale whispered on sets: the action king who flew too close to the sun. But in 2024, 19 years after Trinity wrapped, he walked back into the Marvel Universe through a Deadpool portal and broke 2 Guinness World Records doing it. Because some legends don't fade, they just sharpen their blades in the dark and wait for the right moment to remind you who they've always been.
Wesley Snipes has received the maximum sentence. Prosecutors had pressed for that maximum sentence of 3 years because Snipes did not file his taxes for 3 years.
Every blade gets forged somewhere, and for Wesley Trent Snipes, it started on a muggy July day in 1962, Orlando, Florida, in the arms of Marion Long, a woman who knew her son would need armor for the world ahead. His father, Wesley Rudolph, was there too, but it was Marion who shaped the man, packing up their lives when Wesley was just a boy and heading north to the Bronx, chasing something Florida couldn't promise: opportunity, grit, and a city that didn't let you stay soft. The Bronx in the 70s wasn't gentle. Concrete, sirens, block parties, and survival. It sharpened you or broke you. Marion enrolled her son in martial arts at 7 years old, Shotokan karate first, then capoeira, disciplines that taught him balance, focus, and how to move like water through chaos. While other kids played stickball, Wesley learned forms, kicks, breathing, building a foundation that would one day make him the most dangerous man in a leather trench coat. The dojo became church, the sensei his second father, and the practice his meditation. He wasn't just training his body, he was learning patience, control, and how to turn pain into precision. By high school, he'd found another outlet: performance. Marion got him into the High School of Performing Arts in Manhattan, the Fame School, where black and brown kids could dream in rhythm and monologue. Wesley wasn't the loudest in the room, but he had something else: presence, intensity, a coiled energy that made casting directors lean forward. Theater taught him to inhabit a character. Martial arts taught him to move like one. And the Bronx taught him never to let anyone see you flinch. His first real shot came in 1986, bit parts in Wildcats and Streets of Gold, blink and you miss him roles where he played athletes and hustlers, the kinds of parts Hollywood handed black men who looked like they could throw a punch. But Wesley wasn't satisfied being background. He studied every actor on set, every camera angle, every director's note. 3 years later, he landed Willie Mays Hayes in Major League, the cocky speedster with the smile and the stolen bases, and for the first time, audiences saw him. Not just his body, but his charm, his timing, his range. It wasn't a lead, but it was a spark, and by 1990, Wesley Snipes had the skills, the look, and the timing to show the world what a black man with a blade and a brain could really do. That moment came in March 1991, and it wasn't a hero. It was a kingpin named Nino Brown, draped in Italian suits and Harlem ambition, ruling the Carter apartment complex like a corporate boardroom dipped in crack cocaine. New Jack City was Mario Van Peebles' gamble, an $8.5 million indie that dared to show the crack epidemic through black eyes, with a villain so magnetic you almost forgot he was destroying his own people. Wesley didn't just play Nino, he embodied him. Every calculated gesture, every mirror stare monologue where power and paranoia danced in the same reflection. The film exploded opening weekend, pulling $7 million when nobody expected it to survive, and by the time the dust settled, it had raked in $47 million and made Wesley Snipes a name you couldn't ignore. But he wasn't trying to be just another action star. That same year, Spike Lee cast him in Jungle Fever as Flipper Purify, an architect caught in an interracial affair that rips his life apart. It was the other side of Wesley, vulnerable, conflicted, human, and it grossed $43 million, while proving he could carry drama with the same weight he brought to crime thrillers. 2 films, 2 sides of black manhood, both successful, both unapologetic. Then came 1992, and White Men Can't Jump turned him into a crossover sensation. Woody Harrelson played the con artist white boy. Wesley played Sidney Dean, the Venice Beach hustler with handles and a mouth that never quit. And together, they turned playground trash talk into $211 million worldwide. The chemistry was effortless. Outdoor courts under the LA sun, sweat and banter and buckets. And suddenly, Wesley Snipes wasn't just a black star, he was the star. Someone white audiences loved and black audiences claimed with pride. By 1993, he was trading hoops for dystopia, playing Simon Phoenix opposite Sylvester Stallone in Demolition Man, a sci-fi action romp that pulled $159 million and proved Wesley could hold the screen next to 80s legends without breaking a sweat. Blonde hair, manic energy, pure villain electricity. He stole every scene. 3 years, 4 massive hits, and Wesley Snipes had done what few black actors ever managed. He'd shown the industry he could do everything: gangster, lover, comic foil, action villain, and make money doing it. But he wasn't chasing Hollywood's script. He was writing his own, and in 1998, he'd strap on leather, fangs, and a sword that would change superhero cinema forever. That sword came with a name, Blade, and it sliced through every rule Hollywood had about black superheroes, comic book movies, and who could save a studio from bankruptcy. New Line Cinema was desperate, Marvel was broke, and Wesley Snipes saw an opportunity everyone else thought was a gamble. A vampire hunter from a C-list comic, half human and half undead, dressed in black leather with silver stakes and a katana that sang when it cut. The studio gave him $45 million and crossed their fingers. Wesley gave them a blueprint. Opening weekend, August 1998, Blade pulled $17 million when nobody expected it to crack 10. By the time it finished its run, it had banked $131 million domestically and pushed past $150 million worldwide. Not just a hit, but a phenomenon that proved superhero films could be dark, bloody, and unapologetically black. The hip-hop soundtrack pulsed through every fight scene. The choreography was pure martial arts poetry, and Wesley moved through the role like he'd been born in that trench coat. At the LA premiere, paparazzi flashes lit up the red carpet as Wesley stepped out in leather. Fans erupted at the first Fang reveal on screen, and Marvel had its first real cinematic savior, years before Tony Stark ever suited up. But Wesley wasn't just the star, he was the architect. Back in 1991, he'd formed Amen Ra Films, his own production company designed to give him control over the stories he told and the money he made. Blade was his vision as much as the director's, and when the checks started clearing, Wesley made sure his fingerprints were on every creative decision. He understood something Hollywood didn't want to admit. Black audiences would show up for a hero who looked like them, and white audiences would follow if the action was tight enough. 4 years later, Blade the Saru arrived with Guillermo del Toro behind the camera. Bigger budget, nastier vampires, and a global box office that hit $155 million. Wesley was at the height of his powers, literally and figuratively, commanding sets, demanding respect, and proving the first film wasn't a fluke. The franchise was his kingdom, and he wore the crown with the same intensity he brought to every sword swing. But kingdoms attract enemies. By 2004, Blade, Trinity rolled into production, and the cracks started showing. The film would still gross $132 million worldwide, still make money, but behind the scenes, creative battles were brewing. Disputes over script changes, director David Goyer's vision versus Wesley's control, rumors of on-set tension that would follow him for years. The press started whispering, difficult, demanding, ego. Wesley would later fire back, pointing to the double standard. Sean Connery and Robert De Niro got called perfectionists for the same behavior, but because he was black, he was labeled a threat. 3 films, over $400 million worldwide, and a legacy that would outlive the studio. But by 2004, whispers about control and money were already circling, and the IRS was just getting started. The IRS had been watching since 1999, but Wesley didn't know it yet. He was too busy fighting battles on 2 fronts, one under studio lights and one buried in paperwork he'd been convinced didn't matter. On the Blade, Trinity said in 2004 the tension was thick enough to cut with a silver blade. Wesley had built this franchise from the ground up, poured his sweat and vision into every frame, and now he was watching it slip from his grip. Script rewrites that sidelined Blade for younger characters. Director David Goyer making calls without consulting him. Rumors swirling that Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel were being positioned as the new faces. Wesley pushed back, demanded control, refused to shoot scenes. He felt betrayed the character, and the whispers started spreading. Difficult diva, impossible to work with. He would later sue New Line Cinema and Goyer for breach of contract, racial discrimination, and unpaid salary, alleging that he'd been deliberately marginalized in his own franchise. Years later, in a 2021 interview, Wesley would cut through the noise with a blade-sharp truth. Ask Sean Connery if he's difficult. Ask Robert De Niro. But because I'm black, I'm seen as a threat. But while Hollywood was branding him difficult, a quieter storm was building in filing cabinets and offshore accounts. Somewhere around 1999, Wesley stopped filing tax returns. Not out of forgetfulness, but by design. He'd fallen in with Eddie Ray Khan and Douglas P. Rossile, tax protesters who preached something called the 861 argument, a fringe theory claiming most Americans don't owe income tax, and the IRS is running an illegal racket. To Wesley, it sounded like freedom, like taking control back from a system that already felt rigged. Khan and Rossile set up trusts to hide his assets, helped him file fraudulent refund claims totaling nearly $12 million, and convinced him the government couldn't touch him. For 5 years, 1999 through 2004, Wesley Snipes didn't file a single return, even as he banked millions from Blade sequels, endorsements, and back-end deals. He owed over $7 million, and the IRS was building a case that would make headlines. Power can make you feel untouchable, like the rules that break other people don't apply to you. They came at dawn in October 2006. Federal agents in dark suits pulling up to Wesley's Florida estate as the sun barely cleared the palm trees. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as the FBI swarmed the gates, badges flashing, boxes of files and documents hauled out like evidence from a crime scene. Wesley stepped onto his front steps in a robe, calm, composed, hands visible. He'd been trained in discipline since he was 7 years old, and he wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. But inside, the ground was crumbling. The indictment was federal: conspiracy to defraud the United States, filing fraudulent refund claims, and willful failure to file tax returns for 6 straight years. The co-defendants told the real story: Eddie Ray Kahn, the tax protester guru who'd convinced Wesley the system was optional, and Douglas P. Roseisle, the accountant who'd helped architect the scheme. Kahn preached the 861 argument, like gospel, a fringe theory that claimed most income wasn't taxable, and the IRS was running an extortion racket. Wesley had believed him, trusted him, let him set up offshore trusts and file fake refund claims worth nearly $12 million. Now Kahn was facing a decade in prison, Roseisle 4.5 years, and Wesley was staring at felony charges that could lock him away for the rest of his career. The trial stretched through 2007 and into early 2008. A slow-motion collapse played out in an Ocala, Florida courtroom, with every camera in America pointed at the man who used to hunt vampires. Prosecutors painted him as arrogant, reckless, a millionaire who thought the rules didn't apply to him. The defense argued he'd been misled, manipulated by con men posing as advisors. But the evidence was damning. 6 years, no returns, millions owed, fake refunds filed in his name. In February 2008, the jury came back with a split decision: acquitted on the felony conspiracy and fraud charges, but guilty on 3 misdemeanor counts of willful failure to file tax returns for 1999, 2000, and 2001. It was a partial win, but it still meant prison time. 2 months later, April 24, 2008, Judge William Terrell Hodges handed down the sentence: 3 years in federal prison, the maximum allowed for misdemeanors. Wesley stood stone-faced as the gavel came down, his family sitting silent in the gallery, flashbulbs popping from the press section like paparazzi at a premiere gone wrong. The New York Times headline the next morning read, "Wesley Snipes gets 3 years for not filing tax returns. Not fraud, not conspiracy. Failure to file." The media conflated it all, turned misdemeanors into felonies in the public's mind. And Wesley Snipes became a cautionary tale about ego, taxes, and how fast you can fall when the feds come knocking. The doors finally closed in December 2010 at McKean Federal Correctional Institution in rural Pennsylvania, where barbed wire looped against gray winter skies, and the intake process stripped away everything but your name and number. Wesley Snipes, the man who'd saved Marvel, who'd wielded swords and commanded millions, was now inmate 43,355-018, walking through metal detectors in standard-issue clothes while guards cataloged his belongings like evidence. The snow fell heavy that first month, muffling sound, turning the yard into a blank white canvas where time moved different. Slower, heavier, measured in head counts and meal trays instead of box office weekends and premiere nights. Hollywood didn't wait. While Wesley served his 28 months, the industry kept spinning. Roles went to younger faces, and the direct-to-video market that used to be a safety net for aging action stars started drying up as streaming took over. The Blade franchise he'd built stayed frozen in limbo. Marvel moved forward with Iron Man, and the Avengers without looking back, and every month that passed was another month his name faded from casting conversations. But Wesley had always been a student of discipline, and he used the time the only way he knew how, training his body in the yard, reading, reflecting, planning a comeback nobody thought was possible. He didn't give interviews from inside, didn't write tell-all memoirs, or beg for sympathy. He did his time quietly, the same way he'd learned forms in the Bronx dojo as a kid, focused, patient, waiting for the moment to strike. April 2013. The gates of McKean clanged open under a Pennsylvania spring sky, and Wesley Snipes walked out into the arms of his wife, Nak Young, and his kids. Whispers of plans already forming. The cameras catching a man who looked older but not broken. He was free, but the debt wasn't paid. The IRS still wanted $23.5 million in penalties and interest, and when Wesley's lawyers offered them $842,000 as a settlement, the government laughed and said no. The legal shadow would follow him for years, court appeals stretching into 2018. Every dollar he earned going toward a bill that felt designed to never be settled. The comeback didn't look like a comeback at first. It looked like survival, a string of direct-to-video action flicks with budgets smaller than his Blade catering budget, and titles most people would never remember. Between 2013 and 2018, Wesley took roles in projects that went straight to Redbox and bargain bins, playing cops, mercenaries, and mentors in films that paid the bills and kept his face in circulation, even if the circulation was a fraction of what it used to be. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't the throne he'd once sat on, but it was work. And for a man who'd spent 28 months behind bars watching his legacy fade, work meant proof he was still standing. 2014 brought a glimmer of the old light, The Expendables 3, Sylvester Stallone's nostalgia-soaked reunion of 80s and 90s action heroes, where Wesley joined the crew as a wisecracking demolitions expert. The film pulled a modest $214 million worldwide, nowhere near blockbuster status, but it put Wesley back in theaters, back on posters, back in conversations about who still had it and who was just coasting on fumes. He had it, the charisma, the timing, the screen presence that didn't fade just because the roles had shrunk. The real turning point came in 2019, when Netflix called with an offer that felt like redemption wrapped in sequence and soul. Dolomite Is My Name, Eddie Murphy's passion project about blaxploitation legend Rudy Ray Moore, needed someone to play D'Urville Martin, the actor-director who doubted Rudy's vision and got proven wrong. Wesley said yes, and the film became a critical darling, a love letter to black independent cinema that reminded audiences Wesley Snipes could act, not just fight, and that streaming platforms were willing to bet on legends Hollywood had written off. 2 years later, he was back with Eddie Murphy in Coming to America, playing General Izzy in Amazon Studios' long-awaited sequel. By then, Wesley had made peace with where he was. In a 2021 Entertainment Weekly interview, he said simply, "I've moved on from prison scripts," a quiet declaration that he wasn't interested in exploiting his past for content, that he'd served his time and earned the right to choose his roles again. But the IRS hadn't moved on. 2018 saw him lose his final appeal on the $23.5 million penalty, the financial shadow stretching over every check he cashed. By 2024, Snipes had made peace with being a journeyman, until Kevin Feige called with an offer that would break the internet and 2 world records. That call came with a script page that made Wesley laugh out loud. Deadpool and Wolverine, Marvel's multiverse madness, and right there in black and white, Blade. Not a reboot, not a reimagining, but him, the original, the Daywalker, the man who'd saved Marvel before they even knew they needed saving, back after 19 years of silence to remind everyone where it all started. July 2024, the film dropped like a bomb, opening to a staggering $205 million domestically, and when Wesley stepped through that portal in full leather, katana drawn, the theaters erupted like it was 1998 all over again. At D23 Expo in Anaheim, Wesley walked onto the stage to a standing ovation that shook the hall. Thousands of voices chanting "Blade" like a prayer, like an apology, like a long overdue acknowledgement that he'd been right all along. The Guinness World Records made it official. longest gap between character appearances by the same actor in a Marvel film, and most years between appearances as the same character in a superhero franchise. 19 years, 2 records, 1 legend who refused to stay buried. Gen Z discovered the original Blade trilogy on streaming. TikTok flooded with clips of his sword work and one-liners, and suddenly, a whole generation understood what their parents had been trying to tell them. Before Iron Man, before Black Panther, there was a black man in a trench coat who made Hollywood bet on superheroes and won. Wesley Snipes' story isn't just about a comeback. It's about what happens when the system tries to erase you for demanding respect, for refusing to bow, for believing you deserve ownership of what you built. They indicted him, imprisoned him, labeled him difficult, and left him for dead in the direct-to-video graveyard. But he survived it all, the courtroom, the cell, the silence, and came back to prove that some legacies are too sharp to dull, too foundational to forget. Because some legends don't need Hollywood's permission to matter. They just sharpen their swords in the dark, wait for the right moment, and remind the world who forged the blueprint in the first place.